it not only is encouraging people to focus as much as they can for as long as they can, it means that once they do start to think, oh, actually, I'm not sure this is healthy, maybe I should go and ask something, they feel uncomfortable about reaching out.
What is burnout?
People might find that they don't care as much about work or as much about hobbies and interests.
Yeah.
What their brain is trying to do is throw up these barriers so that they can start to rest. And it's a protective mechanism. Yeah, I was quite rude to some people. When I was burning out, I didn't recognise myself.
Dr. Ben Searle is an organisational psychologist and consultant on employee wellbeing and burnout. He is also the host of the Mind on the Job podcast. Ben formerly worked as a senior lecturer in the Department of Psychology at Macquarie University. Ben has over 20 years of practice and research into the measurement and management of employee wellbeing.
Some people right now, 2025, still brag about this kind of stuff. They think this is the right thing to do. They are real men because they behave in that way.
Yeah, so that's really toxic. It's so unfortunate because be very careful about what I say about this.
That's okay. What is burnout?
So burnout is what happens when your stress system overloads. So we're all used to day-to-day stress, running to catch a train, a near miss traffic accident, things that your body tries to fire up the fight or flight response. And that is a fantastic system that has helped our species to survive for a very long time. But it is very much a short-term solution to threats in the environment. It is when stress is persisting day after day, week after week, month after month, that system isn't working for us anymore, and it starts to break down the way that our capacity to manage ourselves, it starts to undermine our coping systems.
Got it.
So when people say that they are feeling burned out, what that tends to express as is, fatigue, not just being tired at the end of the day. That happens to anyone. And if you're enthusiastic about the things you're doing during the day, then it would be a bit of a shame if you hadn't thrown yourself into that. But if you're consistently tired at the start of the day, or potentially worse still, if you're feeling okay and then you sit down to do your work, and that's when the fatigue kicks in. That tends to be a sign of the emotional side, the fatigue side of burnout.
So much I want to talk to you about this. Such an interesting topic. So you're an organisational psychologist.
I am,
and you have a PhD, and you were a lecturer, and you became even a senior lecturer about various topics in organisational psychology, correct?
Yeah.
What university where you practiced as a senior lecturer?
So that was at Macquarie University in Sydney.
Yeah, fantastic. So in saying that, and the reason I wanted to mention that, you're a psychologist basically. How about if we talk about evolutionary psychology, if we just take that for a minute and talk about stress in the environment of a million years ago when we were chased by lions and stuff like that. What's stress and what's acceptable stress, and is it a good thing, and how, talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, look, you and your tribe are out hunting, a lion jumps out at you. Stress is a very good thing to have.
Makes you alert? Is
it
that
does.
why?
It does. So it does a whole bunch of things very quickly.
What does it do?
So it, as you say, it increases your alertness. It increases the volume of oxygen that you're taking in, and we use that to power the cells in our body. We use that to move more quickly, to think more quickly, to be able to use our strength more. It directs more of that oxygenated blood, that energy, into our muscle cells so that we can move faster, we can do more things.
So, for example, you see even on YouTube sometimes a lion and bunch of lions, like the whole tribe. What's the right word for a tribe?
A pride of
lions?
lions.
A pride, yeah. You see them maybe having a nap under a tree, and then something comes and wakes them up. They're so alert and ready to fight.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I guess, part of it. Is that what you're referring to?
It's the same. It's the same system, and the reason why it is such a useful system is that it can adapt to any kind of threat. If you think this could be a problem, whether it is a lion, whether it is tipping too far back in your chair and suddenly realise, oh, I'm going to fall, whatever it might be, it rushes in to throw these resources into the sort of systems that your body can use
so you can
to get out of danger.
Enough energy in a quick amount of time to be able to react and solve the problem, deal with it. You've got enough strength, and you've got. That's incredible.
Yep. It does a ton of other things. It pulls blood away from the surface, so you're not going to bleed to death as quickly.
No way.
Yeah. So very useful in the moment, but it does that by taking resources away from other parts of your body.
10% of people in this country would know what you just said. Like, this is so interesting.
It is really important to realise that. I mean, stress seems like a bad thing. People say, "Oh, look, I'm really stressed about this," but absolutely,
that's the bad stress that we're going to talk about. But we're now talking about how evolutionary created the stress was a useful tool.
And look, it is still useful if we're rushing to catch a train. It is still useful if we are rushing to meet a 5 p.m. deadline. It is still something that we can harness in those fairly short-term situations. It can still be very useful.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're just saying the bad stress that we will be talking a lot about is in modern day, let's say Australia or the Western world, especially related to work, which is what your field is, organisational psychology, where it becomes really bad. But we're trying to explain the fact that whenever this whole stress thing became a tool for human beings through evolution, was a good thing to enable us to function quickly and be able to react to threats and stuff quick enough.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
have the physical capability and whatever. This is incredible. Okay. And so, how did you become interested in this topic anyway? At which point did you start to focus on stress or burnout as part of your organizational psychology evolution?
Look, this is really where I got started. I started my PhD in working on the topic of stress, and in particular looking at the way that the environment, the workplace environment, can impact on stress.
Of course.
There's a lot of theories and models and complicated things we don't need to go into, but there are a lot of cases of aspects of the work environment that are unhealthy for a lot of people, and there are some that are unhealthy for most people much of the time, but not necessarily all of the time. And there are some situations where it's horses for courses. It really depends on the person. If you fit the right person to the right situation, then they're going to thrive. And you put the wrong person into that situation, they're going to find it very uncomfortable.
I mean, would the example of some people volunteer to be in a submarine?
Absolutely.
I mean, my gosh, to 99.9% of the population, I would let you, I have no idea about what I'm about to say in terms of there's no real evidence that I can provide, but I would imagine the super majority of the population, they would never want to be there, even if it's just a test. If you just park it in Sydney Harbour and say, do you want to go in there and spend 5 minutes, see what it's like? Probably only a few people there, let alone disappearing for a whole month under the water.
Yeah.
So, is that an example of about some people can be suited for certain environments? Or
Absolutely. And in fact, I mean, a lot of organisational psychology got started because of the military saying, we need something to evaluate who's going to do what, because our current system isn't working.
Yes.
We need to be able to work out what abilities and what personal qualities suit people to certain situations.
Sure.
Absolutely, there are people who would not cope with being in a submarine. Absolutely.
or in a jet
Probably one
fighter,
of them.
or in a tank.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are some people who are fine with it.
Mm.
And it's really useful to understand, okay, well, what is it about the
Yes.
situation? What is it about the person? How do we find an appropriate match? And part of that is about stress. Part of that is other things. What is it about a situation that motivates you? What is it that makes you thrive? What is it that interests you? But stress is a really fundamental part of that.
Okay. All right. So that's when you started your interest and research into stress in general and all that. That's when you did your PhD, which is probably, 20 years ago, you said, roughly?
Yeah, 25 now.
Okay. You're looking great, mate. Trust me. Don't worry about it. Okay. So how did that evolve? And what if you were to be, let's say we've got an hour and a half.
Mhm.
And it's such an interesting topic, and we're really honored to have someone who spent the last 25 years thinking about stress and stuff to be able to. I want to talk about whatever you're passionate about. So, what is it that, if you've got audience listening to this, as a matter of fact, some HR folks just told me today, these podcasts could be part of their learning requirements on a yearly basis. So, what is it that you want to teach an HR person or a manager? Where would be because there's so much nuance to it. We can talk about this for weeks. So what would be in an hour and a half the 2 or 3 things you want to focus on?
Look, I think burnout is a core part of that.
Let's talk about that.
So why don't we start with burnout?
What's burnout? Yeah.
So burnout is this response that perhaps the best way of thinking about it is the process by which chronic stress, that persistent exposure to things that are stressing you out, is getting diminishing returns from your system, and the resources that it's drawing away from other parts of your body are starting to cause problems.
And chronic means it's getting worse and worse.
It's getting worse.
My
It is getting worse. So what's happening is that you're being persistently exposed to something stressful. Stress is great for dealing with a short-term discrete problem. It is not great for dealing with long-term problems. And, humans with our ridiculously complicated forebrains, we're very capable of worrying about things that we can't see anymore, or we're capable of worrying about things for a long period of time. So, where other animals might see something that disturbs them and react to that
and move on.
And then move on, we're not so great at the moving on part.
You're processing.
And that can be wonderful. That can be absolutely to our advantage. We can come up with solutions to long-term problems. But it also means that this stress process can be persisting, and after a while that starts to cause problems.
You're not sort of replenishing. Is that the idea you're saying here?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's an important part of it. Is what ought to happen is the stress process ought to resolve, and we switch to a different mode of operating, a sort of a maintenance mode, and then we start replenishing. We start refueling. We start resting and recuperating.
Fresh.
And that's not happening. It starts happening less and less well, and then it's not really happening much at all. And we start building up these additional problems.
So we're not built for that. We that's it. It gets to a point where we start to, as you said, we start to lead kind of resources that we want to use in other things. Becomes all our resources occupied with that kind of how to deal with that stress or something, right?
Absolutely. That's a great way of putting it. We are very depleted of the resources that we need to recover ourselves. So we tend to experience this set of symptoms. Exhaustion is often, but not always the first one. There is a process that is sometimes called detachment.
Yeah.
And what happens here is as we try to deal with the stressful situation in front of us, one of the ways, often happening unconsciously, we start to say, well, I don't care about that. So people might find that they don't care as much about work. They don't care as much about a particular aspect of work. They might find that they don't care as much about hobbies and interests.
Yeah.
what their brain is trying to do is throw up these barriers so that they can start to rest, so that they don't feel responsible for these things all of the time.
Okay.
And it's a protective mechanism that, unless you really withdraw, unless you really take a substantial break, is actually going to make things worse in the long run. And there is this additional experience where it is this sense that we're not really making a difference anymore.
What are the main 3 symptoms of burnout? How can a manager identify symptoms of a burnout in an employee? Maybe 3 things, if you may.
3 things. So the core 3 symptoms are exhaustion, detachment, and something we call inefficacy, this sense of not being able to do very well, not being able to do very much.
Sorry, let's go through them quickly.
Yep.
I know you've touched on a
Yep.
couple already. Exhaustion.
Yep.
Define it a little bit. It's fairly broad. If you don't mind, just define it in this context.
Yeah, sure. So exhaustion is this persistent fatigue, and it's often not just feeling physically tired. It's not really feeling like you have the mental capacity to do some things. It might feel emotionally fragile or just really flat emotionally.
Yes. You go home and you've got a baby daughter, a baby son, and the wife, and they would feel that effect. They
Yes.
would know
Yes.
when you're happy, when you're yourself, and you grab the kid, put on your thing, and you start to speak baby language to them, and whatever. When you're really yourself in that moment, versus that detachment of, they start to see there's something not right here, and the wife says, "Are you okay?" Whatever. I mean, that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. Yeah. So exhaustion can be something that is experienced throughout the day, even early in the morning. It can be something that crops up when you start trying to work. But as you've already said, that starts to bleed into that detachment. That you
They
don't
go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm really impressed. Like, we see all these around us, but the way you're explaining it made me connect the dots so quickly. They are all around us. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is that lack of those resources that because one of the things that we can do to try to boost our recovery is to go and have stronger connections with other people, to spend time with the people we care about, to go and spend time on our hobbies and interests and doing those things.
Yes.
But once we start detaching, we're not getting that experience.
So it becomes a vicious cycle.
It does.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And another part of that is saying, well, look, I don't really feel like I'm enjoying this, but people are pushing me to do things. Maybe I'm not meant to be doing this. Maybe this is not something I'm very good at. So we try and explain away why we're not performing or why we're not coping with these negative self-beliefs.
As opposed to admitting that this situation in this particular job at this point in time relating to you, something is causing you chronic stress.
Yes.
What you said before about the recovery thing and stuff like that, it's such an important topic to my heart because I read about 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, started that journey of reading about the concept of the being in the moment thing. What's that philosophy?
Oh,
Very
mindfulness.
ancient. Mindfulness.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I could see part of reading this stuff that this is how we've been functioning. So, for example, when we work on a difficult problem as engineers, when I'm working with engineers on a difficult problem, I often feel there's no creativity flowing and there's too much stress. I go, let's go for a walk. Dump the environment. We go for a walk. We end up in a cafe. I feel we also start to feel stale, the environment, thick and not creative. Let's go another place. Let's go for another walk or whatever. And then to be able to switch off, you could be at the beach having fun and stuff. You might get some of the best ideas. You'll solve some of the problems that you thought you were really stuck in them, And so I can see I really felt bad when you said, when I said to you the vicious cycle, I really felt it, how bad that could be for someone who's not gained this opportunity to be able to recover. I can see how their life has started to really close in on them, Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It is very much that. It's
Yeah.
very much that experience, and it's that sense of trying to throw yourself at a problem, and trying to pull out all the stops and push yourself. It is like that stress response. It'll work in the short term, but if you keep trying to squeeze blood
Scott's
from a
limit.
stone,
Got to be able to recognize we need a break from this.
Yeah.
Let's do something completely different. Let's go down the road. We start to talk about families and the weekend, whatever, and all of a sudden, naturally, we come back into the topic and we're so fresh.
Yeah.
Whether within 2 minutes or whether within an hour. For example, that's one thing I can share with you from experience.
Yeah, it is a way of trying to capture that recovery. It is a way to pull people away from the thoughts and the concerns, the things that are causing that stress system to stay switched on, to get it switched off for a while, so that the system gets a little bit of recovery, and then that can have cognitive benefits as well as emotional.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. You're the experts, but I believe that's when creativity starts to become available to you. It's really squeezed. Creativity is squeezed completely in that stressful environment when you feel you're stuck.
Yeah.
And that's when I recognize that and go, okay, we've got to move, got to change the environment, change the topic, you know?
It is. I mean, look, it's very difficult. I mean, there's the research on this is not as clear cut. So I want to be careful what I say about it. But there are some suggestions that, like so many other things, stress can be very easily diminished by creativity. Certainly, at very least, anecdotal evidence to suggest that when people have been burned out for a long time, they find it very difficult to dip into that creative well.
Absolutely.
They need to find space for recovery and ways of replenishing those creative juices. Because if you're trying to push and push and push, it is very easy to feel, a sense of detachment from those processes.
This is so unbelievable, man. It's so unbelievable. Such a powerful topic. Because, in my mind, I'm going right now, and I've been in these situations, but I feel immensely grateful for where I am right now and where the company that I've worked very hard for is at. So I feel I feel sad for anybody in that environment because it is a vicious cycle. Because even the conversation starts to become negative. You start to piss off people in the meeting, the colleagues who can help you as well. It's so much negativity from that stress can happen that the chances are you are failing. You're just a dead man walking.
Yes, I mean, this is... There is some controversy around this, but there's sort of increasing evidence that there is this emotional component where people start to feel very raw. They start to be very defensive. If someone says, "Oh, I'm not sure I agree with you," they take that very personally. And yes, it is difficult to extricate yourself from that emotional space when you have all this built-up stress.
Very few people can do that well.
Yeah.
Very few. Super majority, the stress will turn them to become negative. A lot of bad comm skills will emerge, will come back on the surface, as opposed to when you're positive and you've got the mental capacity to be able to recognize these things and keep yourself, stable in the conversation. I can see that easily.
And it's not a wide jump from there to it tends to be contagious. You get a few people in an environment who are starting to burn out and they are displaying these kind of somewhat antisocial behaviours, and they're not as focused as they were, and they might start to miss a few things or have less of a sense of responsibility for things, and that starts to put more work on other people's plates. That tends to upset other people, so they feel less of a connection to their peers. You can get sort of whole workplaces developing this similar experience.
So the question was about 3 symptoms to recognize in an employee that you believe they have started to have a burnout symptoms. We talked, the first thing was the
Exhaustion.
exhaustion.
Yep.
Exhaustion. Second one, and we believe both. You believe it's related, and I totally agree from my experiences. To exhaustion is the
Detachment.
detachment. They go hand in hand.
Yeah, and
Don't
we
they?
can see detachment in a few different ways. So you can get this this interpersonal thing, this experience of people not feeling as connected to their peers, or depending on the role,
Yeah.
people might stop really being concerned about clients. In medical sector, we see medical professionals feeling less empathy towards patients.
Police officers.
Yeah.
What would be the example for them? Detachment
Well, I
example.
mean, it's less concern about the protection of citizens and more about I be very careful about what I say about this.
That's okay. That's okay.
But-
It's the whole stress sucks you into the gravity of that stress. You're sucked into that thing, and all the important stuff around your job becomes, I don't care about this, I don't care about that. Sometimes you might even say it. That's
Yeah.
how stressed you are.
Yeah.
Which is, this is so wrong. You shouldn't be saying that.
Part of it is more about the work that you're doing. So it is that feeling like you don't really care about the tasks,
Yeah.
a loss of interest in the tasks that you used to enjoy.
Yeah.
So we've got detachment and we've got disengagement. And then there is cynicism, as starting to develop this sense that, okay, it's me versus them, that other people don't care, that other people aren't listening, and not trusting other people.
Okay.
People can, have experienced negative environments long enough that someone says, oh, hey, this new thing is changing and it's going to make things so much better. And people thinking, no, I can't imagine that it would. Surely this, anything that's going to change is going to make it worse.
So that because we're talking about chronic stress, we're talking about someone exposed to stress for a long time, consistently, and so you're saying the fact that part of the many bad things that it causes you is that negativity stuff. I guess I'm using my own words here, and so therefore, for that person to become cynical is more than understandable.
Yeah, they've come to expect it because of those experiences. Yeah. So these are all sort of different forms of that detachment, ways that you can spot it. Are people becoming more negative? Are they becoming, more withdrawn? Are they being less enthusiastic about the things they used to be into?
Just on the detachment, just in case someone's still struggling to understand that as a symptom they could recognize in an employee. If we can spend one more minute, and I know you've been very generous.
No, that's fine.
You've hit it from 1,000 angles, but I'm probably struggling with it a little to see it clearly. So, for example, someone is sitting in a meeting and someone got 3-4 people on a table, a new person walks in. They're a really nice person, and the stressed person, probably the nicest person in the room for this matter. And he says, "Hi, how you going? How's it going, man?" It just there's no, typically they would, if I could bet, without the stress, this person would have stood up and given them a hug.
Yep.
And you can just see the effect on this person, how, I don't know how to explain. Just spend one more minute for us, maybe a couple of examples, however you want to explain it.
It can be less of a sense of friendship and camaraderie with the other people.
That's what I'm trying to say.
It can be less of a sense that I don't have it in me to care about your problems at the moment.
So
I've
much
just
on my
got
plate.
to focus on myself.
This problem is so important, so great,
yes,
that I'm occupied by, and which is causing me the stress. And I think this is where all my resources should be directed to, and therefore I have a very good reason not to have time for this, and not to have time for that.
And they don't have to think
is that. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my
God! But they don't have to think that consciously.
Of course,
that can just be this attitude, this mindset that they have developed.
Of course.
And they may not be noticing that they are brushing people off.
But it's stemming from that.
Yes.
Subconscious belief, or whatever you want to call it, and they behave in that way because it's based on that theory.
Yes.
the issue I'm dealing with here is so critical, so great. I have every reason to spend less resources on these other things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
My goodness. And you know what? Some people right now, 2025, still brag about this kind of stuff. They think this is the right thing to do. It's actually, they are good guys, they are winners, they are real men because they behave in that way.
Yes, yes. So that's really toxic. It's so unfortunate because it not only is encouraging people to focus as much as they can for as long as they can. It means that once they do start to think, oh, actually, I'm not sure this is healthy. Maybe I should go and ask something. They feel uncomfortable about reaching out. They feel uncomfortable about saying, oh, I'm not sure that I'm okay anymore. They have invested so strongly in that, and they have had that reinforced by their peers. People have clapped them on the back and said, yeah, you're doing a fantastic job, but you keep doing 14-hour days. You keep pushing this line forward. You keep working on those sales numbers, and it's very difficult to step away from that and going, I know I've been praised for this, but I can feel it's doing me harm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh my God. This is an unbelievable topic. We can talk for 100 hours about this. It's everywhere around us. I've been through it. Everything I've just said, I've been through, including that thing where I believe, the way I've described it, this is not important enough. I'm dealing with something way greater, and to be bragging about this stuff and to think this is the essence of a real leader or a real man. The fact that I've got no time for these little stupid things, emotional things, and whatever. Wow. Okay. So chronic stress then, or burnout, like give us some kind of measurement. What's chronic? What does that mean? When does it become chronic?
So chronic
when does
stress,
it become burnout?
So chronic stress is just when these experiences are persisting for a long time.
Sure. What's a long time before it becomes a burnout? Or it doesn't? It depends really.
It does depend. What we do know is that it will change, because once you've been through a burnout experience, even if it hasn't been really severe, if you've been through a moderate burnout experience, unless you've had a lot of time to recover and recuperate after that, it's going to be faster next time.
Yeah.
Because your nervous system takes a long time to heal.
Yeah.
So one of the so if we take a brief trip to Sweden, in Sweden they have this medical condition on the books called utmattning syndrome. And utmattning syndrome is exhaustion syndrome. It's one of the few places in the world where burnout is recognised as a medical condition rather than a psychological condition only.
Okay.
And where they have studied that, they have shown that the way that people respond to stress, people's capacity to tolerate stress, is impacted by exhaustion syndrome, by burnout, for a long time, for like 7 to 10 years after a serious burnout case. So I can't tell you, look, if you've been under chronic stress for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, you're probably starting to burn out.
Yeah.
You can look for these symptoms, you can look for exhaustion, you can look for detachment, you can look for these inefficacy, these beliefs that you're not accomplishing things. But I can't tell you a time period, but I can say if you have been through burnout before, you need to be very careful, because whatever that time period was in the past, it's going to be less in the future.
Interesting way to put it. So you can start to unpack that as a professional yourself once it's understood there's a burnout situation from the symptoms, etc. Then there's a long-term conversation. An hour or two. You'll be able to then unpack, when you understand their history and what they've been doing the last 10 years or whatever. You can then unpack it properly.
I can do that informally. I don't do this one-on-one professionally. That's not my training is not as a coach. It is sort of working at a systemic level with organisations,
Got it.
trying to identify. Okay, well, what are some
Great
of
systems.
the risk factors
Got
that
it.
we can deal with? But yes, that's a thing that psychologists can do, is to work with individuals to say, okay, well, given your history, I think you should place this as a fairly high priority.
So let's talk about what you do right now.
Yeah.
Because I misunderstood it or
No,
I didn't
that's
know
right.
it. So what is it that you do? You're a coach, did you say?
No. So I am so I was an academic for 20 years.
Yeah.
Until 2021, well, 2021, when I went through burnout and I had to leave my job. And it was very difficult because there was so much about the job that I loved. But I was
the senior lecturer job?
Yeah.
Can you share just in general, whether it doesn't have to be related to you, but just in general as a senior lecturer, what kind of things that could cause burnout in that particular profession?
Sure.
Share some.
Sure. I was director of our unit. So there was a lot of administrative responsibilities, and I had teaching and marking and research project supervision responsibilities.
On top of it. Oh my God.
I had a number of research projects on the go. I had academic papers at various
That's
stages
a lot already.
of development. And I'm not unusual as a person who burned out in 2020 to 2021. Then we hit the pandemic. Now, what happened in the pandemic? A whole lot of the organisational stressors increased. We suddenly had to do a lot of the same work, but without the same resources. We had to change.
What are the resources that were diminishing or disappearing?
Well, so normally I would be, I could go into a lecture theatre and talk to a bunch of people, and then I could. It is not formally trained, but I've got a background in theatre as well. It doesn't take you long as a teacher to be able to read the room.
Sure.
Are people following what I'm saying? Am I going too fast? Do I need to slow down a bit? Are people starting to lose focus? Do I need to make a few jokes? Do we need to take a bit of a break? Once we switched over to online teaching, I lost all of that.
Yeah.
And you don't know whether you are delivering a clear and concise description of the concepts you're trying to explain, or if your mic is off and nobody is able to hear you at all.
That instant feedback is lost. So frustrating.
It is very frustrating.
Like a tool
that
has worked for you for 15 years, that's no longer available for you.
We had to throw away a lot of the assessment tools that we had used year in and year out and develop new ones that could be delivered
So that's
remotely.
more work for you.
We had to develop some new teaching systems instead of the face-to-face things that undergrads were doing. And we had to be ready to cover one another's work. So we had to have more meetings with one another. If one of us went down with COVID, we would suddenly not have people taking whole classes. So we had to start teaching ourselves what that material would be like and how we would deal with it.
Yeah.
And there were opportunities that were lost. I had a research project up and ready to go that I had to pull the plug on. I had, a colleague who was becoming very ill, and so I had to take on some of his responsibilities. Another colleague retired. So a whole lot of things happened at around the same time, not all of which were directly related to the pandemic. And of course, as with many of us with young children, I had kids at home. As with many people who experience burnout, I'm a carer. One of my kids has a disability. So these are challenges that a lot of people have to negotiate and might be managing most of the time. And then when you get a big change, suddenly the coping resources aren't there. Suddenly there's too much for what you are trying to deal with.
Okay. So thank you for that. So the question was, the first question is, how do you recognize symptoms of burnout? Then we talked about um, what you do at the moment. So that's where the part where I've asked you to explain about, what kind of what caused the burnout in your particular profession as a senior lecturer. So what is it that you do at the moment? You're a consultant to an organization about the topic to educate, I guess, HR and the execs and the managers about the topic. Should I say that?
Yeah. So look, that's one of the things that I do.
Which
yes.
is what we are doing right now.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm immensely grateful that you've helped me, and hopefully you're going to help others as well. So thank you.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So part of it is awareness raising. Getting people to understand that burnout isn't a thing like having a bad day is a thing. It is a very serious long-term condition, and it is very easy when you have that condition to think, oh, well, look, I've got it now. I'm feeling bad now. How much worse could it get? It can get a lot worse.
Whoa, that's the chronic, I guess, word that you use in it. Yeah.
All of the symptoms can escalate.
I'm sorry, all the symptoms
can escalate. They can get worse to a point. You can get a lot of physical illnesses. So I developed a range of new physical illnesses that I hadn't had before.
I have no idea. Tell me, like
I had gut problems. I had
I hear
liver
about that.
problems. As someone who doesn't drink, I developed a liver problem, and the doctor was saying, "Oh, look, I really think you might need to cut back on your alcohol."
I don't drink.
Oh, I can't do that. What else have you got that I can try? A bunch of my teeth broke because I
squeezing,
grinding my
stress.
teeth.
I do that.
Yeah,
grinding. Yeah.
And a lot of tooth grinding can happen while you're asleep. So
yes,
if you get in a position where you are so stressed that is going on a lot, that can have some serious dental consequences.
Yeah, no, we've heard that before. Stress and physical symptoms. Clearly that word's thrown around a fair bit, but I'm hearing it from you right now, and in the proper context and based on the education you've already given me, I can definitely see what you mean. Okay, so you're educating a leadership team and the HR folks in an organization about recognizing stress and dealing with it, recognizing burnout and dealing with it. And in terms of dealing with it, I guess there's a lot of nuances. It really depends on the industry. There's a lot of nuances for that particular environment, for that,
Sure.
So we can't, cover everything, but what do you want to share anything about that?
Sure. So there are two real sides to it. When we're trying to manage burnout better, we can manage our response, and that involves helping managers to become aware of it and to recognise that it's a problem rather than something to pat people on the back for, to watch out for certain symptoms.
Let's talk about this for a bit.
Go ahead.
This is $1 billion question at point that you've just covered. And I appreciate you, but I just want to make sure we explain it because it's such an important point. This whole thing of a pat on the back versus recognizing this is a problem. Can you please give us an example? Can you make it so clear? Find a typical example that you teach. You probably were teaching in a textbook, textbook example about that. I really want people to understand this. So someone who's showing symptoms of detachments and rude to people because he says, I don't care about this. I've got no time for that. In my own words, that's not your words. Yeah. And the manager could see this. Oh, he's focused. He's a good guy.
Yeah. So seeing it as focus, seeing it as being good with priorities, patting someone on the back and saying, well, it's clear we made a good decision to promote you to this position because you are, you're aggressively managing your priorities.
My God, that's the word, aggressively doing it. you've got no time for this bullshit and whatever else, and being rude to people and abrupt and whatever, and they recognize that those guys focus, got no time for bullshit, having coffee, having a chat over the coffee in the coffee room or something. But these little chats are so important to build trust and get to know people around you and stuff.
Yeah,
It's just,
absolutely.
oh,
And look, I am a very mild-mannered person, almost to a fault. And yeah, I was quite rude to some people. I was quite abrupt on some things.
at the time when you going
when
through
I
the
was
stage.
burning out,
Yeah,
I didn't recognize myself.
there you go.
So being able to recognize that is the first part, and then being able to have what can be difficult conversations is the next part, and how you do that.
So if
will
you're
vary.
speaking to a manager right now, or a leader in particular, because the leaders, please correct me on that. I've learned from your colleagues in the industry, other org psychologists, great people. I've learned that one of the key thing about a manager or the roles is to role play those leadership values, the values of the company. The values of the company. And so, therefore, every manager should know about this and do that. But in particular, the leaders, to recognize this and not to give them pat on back, as opposed to saying, "Hey, do you have 5 minutes tomorrow? Can we talk tomorrow? I'm going to book you for a coffee or lunch or something," and really go through it and say, "Listen, yesterday in the meeting, you were a bit too abrupt with Jenny, or you were a bit rude to Steve, or something like that. Mate, I really love your focus and all that, but look, there's a borderline here. What's going on here? Why do you feel you do it?" Start this convo and maybe then seek a practitioner in your industry to work with them or something.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to be a threatening, no, that language is absolutely forbidden, we don't do it this way. But saying, look, I have noticed this, and perhaps this isn't what we normally see from you. And, you've built up a lot of trust from your team, and we don't want that to be lost. That's one of the strengths of having you lead that team. So what can we do to try to pull this
And
backwards?
Ben, correct me on that. Even just asking that question, the answer, the reaction, it's like a test. Asking that question, almost
Can
a
be.
test.
Yeah.
The way they react is almost going to confirm immediately there's a stress situation. Or, for example, if they said, "Oh my God, you're absolutely right. I was beating myself in the last 24 hours about this. You're absolutely right. Look, I know I'm a bit busy, but there's no excuse for this. I definitely recognized it the moment I said it. I've regretted it." You immediately go, "Look, maybe it's not that much of a problem. I'll give them another chance. I'll observe a bit more." But if they almost give you an answer where they didn't even see it, they didn't even recognize it, they didn't think a big deal happened, you know what I mean? That in itself is such a test, right?
Oh, and there's another layer on top of that as well, because they could be defensive. As we said, that one of the things that can happen when you burn out is that you get this very defensive response to anything that could be a criticism. They could be coming into this meeting assuming that you're going to chew them out. And the moment you start, they start throwing up walls or giving excuses or being very defensive. And that is a very important sign.
And for example, part of being defensive, I guess, Ben, is also could be telling in terms of justifying why, because I've got to work for 18 hours a day on this project and blah, blah, blah. It's like almost they're explaining the real problem. Just if you know what I mean? I mean, this kind of conversation, and it's not really too much ask. If anybody calls themselves a leader and can't recognize stuff like that and have that kind of conversation and get a decent indication from the response, I don't think they're leaders. I mean, there's not too much to expect from a leader, right?
It's not. No, it's a really important part of leading, is to be able to connect with your people.
Yeah.
And to be able to see when things are changing and to make people comfortable with talking about why things are working, why things are not working.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important part of the response side. But there's another side to it which is a lot more proactive, And that's where you start saying, well, what seem to be some of the risk factors in your industry, in your organisation? What are some of the psychosocial hazards? Are people really under the pump? Are people really being pushed at the moment for some reason? Is there some deadline that everyone's working towards? Or has there been a massive change recently? Have you laid off a lot of people?
But forensically speaking, for you, correct me on that, Ben, starting with an example, someone who is stressed, you would know what they've been working on and what's going on with that project and the management, because you're going to meet their manager and whatever. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, it has to start probably one of the quickest by that, and you get a good idea of what's going on and you go from there, right?
Yeah. Look, I mean, one of the easiest ways to approach this in an organisation that is recognising that they have a problem is to speak to those individuals. And you know, maybe you can do other forms of diagnostic on where are there the most distressed people and what's been happening in those areas in the organisation.
Yes, create a heat map in terms of roles and divisions and management and stuff. You start to see connections in that heat map, yeah?
That's right. That it's you know, there are a lot of people in this space who are you know, doing wonderful work with tools that organisations can use to evaluate risks and hazards and things in organisations. But when you tally up the results from those, there are rarely any surprises. People at the coalface in the organisation know where the big problems tend to be.
Definitely. Not that hard. Not that hard.
That said, there are organisations now who are looking at the new legislation in health and safety and saying, well, we need to be doing things to prevent the risk. We need to reduce or mitigate these risks somehow. What are the things that we need to be doing? And that's when you start working with the organisation through, okay, well, these are some common risk factors. But you know, usually you're going to get a better result if you start with the problem that most people are recognising as the true problem. That is where you're going to get people on board and saying, oh, there's something going on that is likely to make a difference. Whereas if you start fixing things over here that might have some impact in the next 5 years, when everyone knows that the problem is over here, then people can draw the conclusion that they don't really care about fixing the real problems.
Yeah. You know, Ben, what comes to mind, I know it's a little bit slightly off topic, or I don't know, but if I can rudely just share this with you. You know, what we do at Martian Logic is we build a HR system for HR folk, trying to automate every admin function they have. That's our vision. That's our motto, right? Make operational HR hum, make it humming. Yeah.
Yep.
In saying that, you know, this is you know, we were just a bunch of engineers trying to create a product, and we listen to clients and we make the product better and stuff. We really understood HR and organizational psychology and organizations and stuff. I mean, we were a tiny team at the time anyway. But recently, as we grew, as we started to work more with HR folks, like listening to you, imagine you're working with an organization that's, I don't know, 10,000 employees. I'm not going to even say Woolworths of the world.
Yeah.
What is it now? Probably 500,000 employees, something ridiculous like that. So we're just saying 10,000. So the chances are you might be working with 5-6 HR folks, right, that need to be involved and a bunch of leadership team or whatever. And if you think about this HR person that is trying to work with you and learn and arm themselves with the right strategy to then help potentially so many people in the organization, this kind of work versus the admin shitty work, it makes me feel really bit better about my job as a building software. If I can create time for the HR folks to do real HR work like this, that's what a lot of people don't understand, what HR, the potential of HR can be and should be, how great it can be. A lot of people think HR is admin. And admin is HR. what a sad thing.
Mm.
I've only started to recognize that and the difference in the last maybe 3, 4 years. I remember
Yeah.
speaking at conferences, and that was the whole thing. HR is admin, admin is HR. What do you guys think? And then unpack all this and how many people think like that, and real difference if these HR folks aren't doing admin, if there's a way to automate all that admin away, how they could be doing so much great thing. And I said, it's all about creating human solutions, human resource solutions. Whether it's, let's say, this whole working from home situation, how we can make it win-win.
Yeah.
So many great things they could be doing. But this, oh my God, this trumps anything I've ever thought about. If an HR person can work with you
Yeah.
and make 50, 100 people in this organization feel so much better and their respective families feel so much better, that is real work, man. That is real work. That's
Yeah.
a real impact.
Yeah, no, look, I appreciate that. But look, I think your point is very valid, that freeing up people in HR, freeing up people with the capacity to put the human in human
Yeah,
resources.
you're right.
Freeing
Thank
up
you.
people
Can
to-
I use that?
You go by all
Put the
means.
human resource. Thank you very much. Amazing.
It encourages, it is so important for the HR team to have the time and the resources to say, well, where are the problems that we have? What are the needs of our people? How do we do a better job of satisfying those needs? And yeah, people are at work performing tasks, but we are also people. We're biological systems with stress and nervous systems. We are people who are aspiring to grow and have meaningful connections with other people, and that's the potential of organisations. Organisations can be wonderful places where people have a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose and a sense of connection, it is really frustrating to have all of these experiences related to me of people who say, "Oh, I burned out because I was expected to do this and this and this, and there weren't any resources to support me, and nobody seemed to be caring." And it doesn't need to be like that.
Yeah. It's so interesting what you said. I'd love your feedback on this. So, for example, at some point, Google, which is total rubbish, but in any case, Google became the kind of example everybody use about a workplace environment that's, for example, now I can use that word, learning it from people like yourself, psychologically safe environment where people, they can be themselves and they can have certain autonomy and the ability to be creative, say whatever on their mind and disagree with things and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And Google somehow became a perfect example of that, right? Which is, I don't think it's the case. I think it's marketing stunt. Nevertheless, when you think about that versus stress, people in that environment, if and when that environment is done properly, as opposed to marketing stunt, versus an environment run by stressed people and stressed managers. How can a stressed manager, burnout manager, at all be the trusted person to chair a meeting in a group of people where a psychologically safe environment is actually being enforced? They don't even go hand. They're completely exclusive, these two things.
It's very difficult to see how someone can lead well and, not just perform basic management functions, but, inspire people, make people feel trusted, make people feel empowered.
Yeah.
If they are exhausted, if they are feeling detached and aggressively prioritizing, and if they are feeling like there are some things they're just not making a difference with, I can see that would make it difficult to do good leadership, and that's going to have an impact, an escalating impact on everyone beneath.
Yeah. This whole thing that as a I'm careful to say a leader versus manager because I mean they sometimes need to be same. You need to be a manager that exhibits leadership qualities. I think
Yeah.
that is the killer thing because especially in a company like ours, we're not 10,000 people, still under 50, and so for me just to be a leader as a CEO, I've got 20 hats, let alone one or two. So I'm doing a lot of work, but I'm also need to be a leader. So that's why I think from what I've learned from your colleagues, I would love your feedback on that. Is what I think is really important. Power is to be a manager that recognizes the importance of their leadership quality on people because they still need to exhibit leadership qualities, right? And in saying that, the quality of the conversation, I call it, it's a word I've invented. I say to people for the last 5 years, ask anybody in the company, they know this Anwar's thing. It's called the quality of the conversation. Before I learned about the psychologically safe environment and all these other words that you guys use to describe that, I describe it as the quality of the conversation, meaning when you're having a meeting, how you leave people when that meeting finished. Is anybody felt isolated, felt not listened to, felt oppressed, felt, as opposed to everybody feeling, you can see the laughter, you can see they're all happy equally, as opposed to that person sitting there that you've shut down rudely or whatever. And I started to recognize that. I would beat myself for 24 hours until the next meeting if I know that I did that. But I make the point, I apologize to them in front of everybody. If I had to do it on Slack later, I put everybody that was in the meeting say, listen, I'm really sorry about the way I've handled your objection or your thing. That was completely inappropriate, man. Whether I agree with you or not is completely separate thing. And make sure I put everybody on that chat that was in the meeting, So I do that and I start to think about why did I do that? I want the next conversation to be better. And then I start to learn from people like you about this whole psychologically safe environment. And I started to go, hold on. This makes so much sense because how can you expect a company like ours for us to be creative is so important, critical, forget important, right?
Yeah, yeah.
How can someone be creative if when they come up with a stupid idea, you shut them down, make them feel bad? I mean, in the memoirs of Bezos, mind you, he said something that I've learned from him that I think made a big impact on me. But in the memoir, he wrote, there was a book that came out about maybe 15 years ago now. It's someone said that worked on Team A, when they were still 10 or so, said he used to say things like, oh, look, sorry, I didn't take my stupid pills this morning. I don't understand what you said. And I go, whoa, back then, maybe when I was an immature manager, I might have laughed about this. I thought, he's a real man. He's got no time for this little bullshit. This is what we were talking about almost, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, if you are responding that way to ideas that you don't think are good enough, then everyone is second guessing their ideas. Nobody is prepared to bring forward something that is a little bit unusual, a little bit extreme, a little bit distinctive, for fear of it being shot down. And then suddenly, where is your innovation?
Yeah. And then made a connection between a book that I've read for some reason about 10, 15 years ago, the Stephen Coven one, the pyramid thing, the trust at the bottom.
Yes, Covey. Yeah,
Covey. Yeah. What's the book's seven something?
Seven habits of highly successful leaders.
I think so. Yeah. So then I realized that what he's talking about is the same thing. It is the psychologically safe environment thing. The whole trust. He starts with a trust, but the trust. And then someone spent on a podcast with me, one of your colleagues as well, more than an hour about building trust. And they said, oh, well, you could go to make a coffee. Someone comes to make a coffee also in the kitchen. And they say to you, how's your weekend? The way you respond, that little nuance, those little micro conversations are a big part of you exhibiting leadership stuff and building trust with people. Because it's not only you could be damaging it with that person, you'd be surprised. They sort of hear in the vibe and they can see how that vibe abruptly changed or flew beautifully between you and that person. They feel that vibe and you're killing the entire culture just in 5 seconds how you respond to that person.
Yes. And this is the fascinating thing about trust is it takes a very long time to build the trust up and you can lose it like that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's a good way to put it. I never thought about it like that. Yeah. So they all sort of come back. This is why I started to appreciate people like yourself, man, this industry, organizational psychology. I mean, it really is fantastic. And also, someone told me, your colleague last time, I think 2 weeks ago, we had someone in your industry as well. When I say colleague, industry colleague, um, it's actually not easy to start to practice. You need about 7-8 years of your life before you can practice it.
It's
because you need masters minimum, correct?
Yeah. So it's a 4-year undergraduate degree with honours, and then a 2-year master's degree.
That's 6.
And then you can't call yourself an organisational psychologist. You
2
need
years?
to do 2 years of supervised practice.
It's
You
like
need-
lawyers, right?
Yeah.
They do that?
Oh,
2 years
I'm
of
not sure.
as a
I'm not-
lawyer.
Yeah.
I can't get someone just because they graduate or whatever to work in a corporate environment, give me an advice. That's illegal according to, well, in New South Wales anyway. It's, to be honest, I mean, anyway, I was going to call it some monopoly, but you've got to work in a law firm, be supervised by a lawyer for 2 years before you can do that.
It's very similar.
So very similar, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, so that's 6 now.
So 4 years undergrad, 2 years of masters.
Oh,
and two,
sorry,
2
8.
years
I
of
beg your
supervision.
pardon.
So it is 8 years.
Oh, my goodness. So let's say you start at 18. What is that now? 26.
26.
Before you can start to actually work, yeah.
I mean, you're working for the previous 2 years.
Sure,
but
sure.
You can't call yourself an
Sure.
organisational psychologist
Sure.
until you've done. And okay, you can say that you're a practitioner in organisational psychology, but I
You
think
can't
that
give an advice.
I
You
think
can't work in a corporate environment, give advice, I'm pretty sure.
you can't call yourself a psychologist, and that's kind of the big thing, is that psychologist is a protected term for a reason. That when you're giving advice, the fact that that I am a psychologist when I'm giving advice make people think, oh, okay, this is more relevant. This is more important.
Yeah. You can
Than
cause damage.
Just
if you don't know what you're doing.
someone who says, oh, look, I know about this. I'm a leadership expert. Anyone could be a leadership expert.
Sure.
If I do something unethical, if I say something that is untrue, as a psychologist, my peers can do something about that, and I can lose my license. So I think that is a really valuable strength that we have, that there is something riding on us being honest, on being ethical. And it means that I have to be a bit more careful about what I say, a bit more prepared before I go into a meeting. And there are some times when people say, oh, could you give us a ballpark idea as to what's going to be the solution here? And I need to be very careful.
For example, I'm not ready yet. I need more evidence. I need more time. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And sometimes I have a great idea. I think, oh, look, I think this is the answer, or this is the approach that needs to be taken. And then I will waste a lot of time. Well, waste is the wrong word. I will spend a lot of time, hitting the research, maybe gathering new data of my own to see if there is evidence to support this new idea. Because a lot of things can seem like they make sense, but is there evidence? That's kind of important. If you're going into organisations and saying, for reasons of employee mental health or employee capability, you should be doing things this way instead of that way, I'm much more comfortable being able to do that from a basis of evidence.
Hey, man, this has been really enlightening. I never interviewed anybody about this topic, so this is brand new stuff to me. I'm really immensely grateful. This is the stuff that money can't probably ever pay for. I'm really grateful. You've opened my eyes about a bunch of things, including myself, not just some employees that could be going through that. That was very, very powerful. As you were speaking, I'm seeing images in front of me, how I've behaved in certain situations, how some of my people might be behaving because they're stressed. I cannot be more grateful. I really appreciate it, and I really hope we'll do it again, and we'll sort of dive deeper into some aspects of this because it's such a wide topic. So I really wish you the very best. You're an amazing listener. I've interrupted you so many times. You're a good human being. You've you've handled it really well, and I'm really grateful for that. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.